Hello and welcome to the Mysticast, where you join me, Jack Stafford, a student of metaphysics and member of the Aetherius Society, the cosmic religion for the Aquarian Age, as we break down the barriers between religion, science, metaphysics, philosophy, and mysticism, all of which are really only aspects of the self-same quest for truth. Please note, this is an independent program, not produced or fact-checked by the Aetherius Society. Today, my guest is Robin Dale Hanson. Hello, Robin.
Nice to meet you, sir.
Nice to meet you too. So
I
I
don't
heard
know
about
if you know that I did some work on the sacred in the last year and a half, so that might connect with your
I didn't.
religious
Well,
topics.
kick us off with that. Give us a short summary of what you because you've written. I'm on your newsletter, and I've seen. Been trying to read some of your books, and you're so many ideas, so productive. It's hard to keep track of everything you've put out there.
So I do many kinds of institution proposals, ways to change the world, and often I get the pushback that I'm messing with the sacred.
There
And
you
in the
go.
past, I had found that obscure and impenetrable and didn't really understand what they meant. And I finally decided to figure out what this was about. What is this thing and why is it in my way? So I used my usual social science method, which is to first collect a whole bunch of datums, sort of things that people say go along with the sacred. And I collected a list of 68 correlates, things people say tend to go along with the sacred. And on the other side, I collected a bunch of offered explanations of the sacred, what it's supposedly for. And then my usual method is to try to match those things, try to look among the explanations that could best fit the patterns that we've seen. And so I came up with one of them that explains a lot, and then I made a variation on it to explain more.
Okay. And
So,
what was the headline conclusion?
well, so the 68 explanation or correlates come together into 7 themes. The one standard explanation by a guy named Emil Durkheim from over a century ago says the sacred is fundamentally a way for groups to bind together by seeing something the same. And that explains 3 out of the 7 themes. And then I find I can explain the other 4 of the 7 themes by noting that when we have a way of seeing things near versus far, that's an obstacle to seeing things the same if you see it up close and I see it far away. And so my postulate that then explains the other 4 themes of the sacred is that for sacred things that we're trying to bind together about, we have the habit of seeing them from afar, even when they're close. And that means we will all see them the same way. And that means we will be able to see them together and bind together on that basis. So, for example, in our society, medicine is sacred. If you're sick and I'm not, you might see your sickness different than I, and that would be an obstacle to us seeing it the same together. But you now have the habit in medicine of seeing your sickness as if from afar, not from close up, because you take this sort of distant attitude and respect toward medicine, and you don't really want to think about your disease. You just want to trust the doctor and do what they say. And in that way, see it from afar, in which case we can all agree about medicine and what should happen because we are seeing it sacredly together in the same way.
Oh, okay.
So
That's very
that's the idea.
interesting. Yeah. Yeah, because I heard about you from your work with UFOs because the Aetherius Society, of which I'm a member, is the oldest international UFO associate organization.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and so your ideas, your Grabby aliens, your great filter hypothesis, alien indifference, Fermi paradox solutions, and signaling theory. You've thought a lot about aliens and the possibilities of extraterrestrial life, but I just wanted to, because you're talking about those agreed sacred values, do you think that because you base your work on these foundational pillars of science, like that we have a date for the beginning of the universe, the speed of light, all of these fun agreed constants. But do you think that if you take any of these pillars away, then you'd have to like reassess your ideas?
Well, I think we should all be willing to reconsider anything we believe to the
Yeah.
extent we can. The question is just how we do that and how productive it is for any one thing. Obviously, things that we have more grounds to be suspicious of, we should more be willing to question. But we can't really help but use our best understanding to make sense of things. And that's what we can and should do, even with UFOs.
And do you think, because you said like you think we're a pioneer species because we're one of the earliest? Because when we look around, we don't see any evidence of other extraterrestrials or other life forms. But do you think that could be just our lack of sight?
So the fact that we look out in the universe and don't see any aliens is a key data point. And so I and some colleagues did an analysis of this key question of where are aliens in space-time? And our analysis assumes a 3-parameter model, and each of those parameters is fit to a particular data point, and one of the parameters is fit to that particular data point, i.e. the fact we don't see anything. The parameter there is the speed at which they expand. And so if aliens appear somewhere in space-time, and then after a little while, short on the cosmological scale, they start to expand, and then they expand at some speed, presumably the fastest speed they could if there was some internal competition pushing the ones who rushed the edge to get an advantage. Then the question is, what is that speed? And it turns out robustly that if their speed of expansion is slow, then if you are arriving at the random time that other aliens would arrive, and then you looked out in the universe, you would see them. So your time would have to be very unusually early for you not to see them, and that would be strange. So if I assume our time is probably typical of when advanced species arise, then I notice that I don't see them. But robustly, if they expand very fast, say half the speed of light or more, then at the random time when an alien species arrives, it doesn't see anything in the sky. That's the key point. So that basically, if they're expanding that fast, they would be here by now instead of you being able to see them, in which case you wouldn't be here.
But don't you think that presumes a very linear, constant theory? I mean, what about a multidimensional universe with dark matter, dark energy, because we're solidified sunlight, we're these carbon-based life forms. If the other frequencies life exists, then that would explain how they can.
So yes, the analysis I just gave you assumes the usual space-time structure, 3-dimensional space, 1-dimensional time, and a limit of the speed of light untraveled. That's the basis of the analysis I just described. Now, if you want to question those assumptions, we should go slow and one at a time. If you add, the possibility of going faster than the speed of light, or, the possibility of using other dimensions to do the equivalent of that, you get a much harder problem, which is that any aliens that appeared anywhere in space-time, they could have already been here by now.
Well, there's many sightings. I mean, also by military personnel. And
right. But now you'll have to understand why you don't see them in the sky, even though they are postulated that they could be here by now.
Yeah.
So then we wouldn't then try to explain what we see in the sky by the fact that they haven't got here yet. We would have to offer other explanations. So,
or if they're in another dimension, if they're here, but
okay,
a different frequency, like high radio.
So let's start with the usual space-time assumptions. And then I think when we come up with an explanation there, it'll actually generalize to the cases you're thinking about. So, but it's easier to start with the usual things we believe. So let's assume the usual space-time structure and that the speed of light is a limit. But ask the question, if there were actually aliens here right now, say embodied in UFOs, what would be the best explanation that could make sense of that, given all the other usual assumptions we accept? So, once we find the best explanation there, then we might ask, okay, if we deny the usual assumptions and make other assumptions, then what other theories become possible? But I claim the same theory that makes sense if we don't deny the assumptions still works pretty well then. So why not stick with it? So again, the question is, given the assumption that some UFOs are actually aliens, how could we make sense of that? Well, what sort of scenario would be the most likely? And then in the end, we'll want to ask, how likely is that scenario? Because that would be the key a priori likelihood we want to set up against this data that we seem to see UFOs in order to try to infer what's going on. So many people have said the idea that there are aliens here right now is so crazy unlikely that even if you think you see them, you should just assume you're hallucinating or something, because it couldn't possibly be true. For that sort of argument to work, you need a really low prior likelihood, right? When you do the analysis of what's the chance they're here now, it should come out 1 in a trillion or smaller or something, right? If you end up with a much higher probability, like I come up with roughly 1 in 1,000, you have to admit it could be.
That's a pretty good probability.
You have to look at the evidence to decide. You can't just dismiss it on the basis of a prior. So like a typical murder trial, I'd say the prior is 1 in a million. That is 1 in 1,000 people get killed, and maybe they've got 1,000 associates who might have done it. So any one accusation of this person killed that person is roughly a 1 in a million prior. But we still allow murder trials because if somebody's willing to make an accusation, we should listen to them. And quite often we're persuaded, right? So in this case, the challenge is what's the most likely scenario and what's the odds. So here's my most likely scenario that fits with what I've learned about aliens in general from my analysis of just aliens in space-time. I'm going to have to make a number of little assumptions, each of which is a little unlikely, but when I add them all up, it's not that unlikely. So the first assumption is life didn't start on Earth. It started somewhere else before. Let's call it Eden, some prior planet that existed before Earth. And then Eden seeded our stellar nursery. That is, our star was born in a whole bunch of stars born in the same place and time, very close together, roughly 10,000 stars, all born in the same place and time. So somehow a rock got kicked off from Eden, drifted, landed in our stellar nursery, and seeded the whole nursery. Because they're all very close, lots of rocks running back and forth really fast. And, within a few tens of millions of years, our stellar nursery drifted apart. All the stars sort of drifted apart, and they basically spread out into a ring around the galaxy, and they're out there right now. So assumption number 1, there was Panspermia ancestor. And then assumption number 2, not only our planet was seeded, but at least one other planet was seeded, and they become our Panspermia siblings. They were born from the same source, and they would have a lot of aspects in common with our life, at least, from over 4 billion years ago. And next assumption is they reached our level before us. And that's not so crazy that they might do it before us. Okay, what next? That doesn't quite get it. We need to explain 2 more things. One is we don't see them in the universe, and the other is they're here right now, and they're doing weird stuff. Okay, so the next thing we need to postulate, which isn't that crazy, but we still need to postulate, is they had some sort of rule against expansion. They said to all of their members of their civilization, you're not allowed to go out in the universe and just take things over and change them all. That rule would explain why we don't see very much around us. Our galaxy, after 4 billion years, so plausibly, if they got earlier than us, it would be at least, say, 100 million years. It would be quite a coincidence if they were much less than 10 million years closer to us in history. So they've been at our level for at least 10 million years, which would have been plenty of time to remake the galaxy had they allowed that or been at all inclined. So the fact that we don't see the galaxy remade means somehow they had a rule against that, and they enforced that rule, and they've successfully enforced it for 10 or 100 million years, which is quite an achievement. So that's the assumption we need in order to explain why we just don't see stuff.
All right, well, let me do the mental mind games too. Let me postulate that because on this planet, you go to the bottom of the ocean and you find some little life. You go to the highest mountain on the most snow-capped peaks, you find life. You lift up any rock, there's life.
Right.
So
on the surface, at least.
Yeah.
Go down 1,000 kilometers, you don't see as much of it.
Yeah, but there's so on all the other planets, they why God made them, they exist. They're just empty. It's a bit of a, it doesn't really fit with what we know from our world, no? But if you postulate that life exists as Tesla said it, you understand the universe, think in terms of frequency and vibration. If life exists at other frequencies, that would explain what I was.
So the scenario I'm telling you is completely consistent with life being ubiquitous. What can't be ubiquitous as life at our level of
Right,
civilization
I agree.
advancement.
We
Okay,
found some
right.
common ground there.
Okay,
Because
but
we're at a very basic life
simple
from
life could be everywhere.
because
Okay,
there are so many frequencies. If you look at the length of the electromagnetic spectrum, we can see
right,
such a tiny part of it.
right. But part of the analysis here is the idea that getting to where we are is hard. So something along the path that led to us is hard and unlikely. It doesn't have to be the very first step to life. It could be later steps along the line. But if getting to where we are was very easy, then we'd really face the puzzle. Why does the universe look so empty?
Well,
Because we'd
we're at a
expect so many others of them.
we're at a very low level as far as my understanding. There are so many frequencies, and our particular frequency is so base that not
Well,
many people
so
want to hang around in it.
I mean, it's not that we expect other people to see us as we are now from far away, because we're kind of invisible. We're what I call quiet. The
Yeah.
point is just if we look at our future, it looks like it doesn't take that much time, much less than 1,000,000 years, for
Mm.
us to start making a visible impact.
But if there
That's
was,
the reason.
if we got hit tomorrow by a giant meteorite or the Earth turned on our axis, in about 10,000 years, all that will be left of our civil because the plastic will be destroyed.
Sure,
The,
of course.
you
Right,
know, there will be
absolutely.
so the idea of ancient civilizations, Lemurius, Atlantis,
Sure.
that we've already gone through these idea. You know,
Yeah.
there's we
But
could have already.
I mean, it's possible. It may or may not be true, but I think it's a bit of a distraction for us to try to calculate that because it's not really what we're trying to explain here, right? So what we're trying to explain here is people seem to see UFOs and they
Mhm.
do weird stuff and they
Yeah.
seem pretty spectacularly capable. And the question is how to make sense of that, right? And there are other ways to make sense of it aside from assuming that UFOs are aliens, but this is one of the theories. And so to engage it, we should try to think through what's our best scenario that
Mm.
can make sense of it. And so, as I said, the best scenario I can come up with that's just consistent with all the usual things we think
Mm.
is that we had Panspermia siblings who made some rule against expansion, and then they could look out and see their other siblings in the sky really easily. It's easy to because we have exactly the same stellar spectra. And so
Mm.
it's really easy to find the sibling stars in the sky. And they could know that those are the stars, plausibly, that might also have life. And they could know that if those other planets achieved life at our level or farther, they would threaten their rule against expansion. Their siblings could then expand and take over the galaxy and
It,
overturn their plan of not allowing it. And
it
so
seems, that doesn't seem plausible to me because when there'd be so many siblings, I mean,
just 10,000, less than
yeah,
10,000.
because by definition, all the UFOs that have the sightings, they must be more evolved than us because we can't travel
Yes.
to other worlds. So it just goes to, if you extrapolate that, we're the base. We're just still in the swamp state,
Obviously.
the
So
amoebas.
if these other panspermia siblings got to our level 100,000,000 years ago, then even if they come here, they're still way more advanced than us. Yes.
Mm.
But the point is, first, we need to explain why didn't they go elsewhere? Why don't we see any evidence of them changing other things? And then why are they here now? And so we can infer, we can guess a reason why they might not seem elsewhere. If they made a rule against expansion, it might be ecological, religious, who knows what, or just they want to keep their civilization coherent because it would become incoherent if it spreads out too far. So they had some reason against expansion. And they knew that they could look in a telescope if they're really advanced across the galaxy and see that there's life here and even that it might be becoming more advanced. And then they could infer we risk violating the rule. And that's a reason to make an exception to their general nobody leaves rule, to let somebody from there leave to come here. And the agenda for coming here would be then to keep us following their rule. And obviously they could have succeeded that by just killing us.
Yeah.
It would be really easy. Obviously, they didn't do that. So that means they don't want to just completely force their answer on us.
Mm.
They would like to persuade us to follow their rule. So that's a plausible agenda why they would be here. They're here to persuade us to follow their rule. And that's why they aren't in the universe that we see, but they are here.
Okay,
Now,
well, that's another great similarity between, because we're in agreement that we don't see, and we're in agreement that there's these rules. According to the Aetherius Society, the rule is karma, because if you go into your children's classroom and you do their homework for them, they don't learn anything. They're not going to
Right.
graduate with any intelligence. So we're at this crucial stage of, the baby walk, the
Right.
baby taking its first step.
Okay.
So the law of
So
karma would be another rule.
right. So that's not a crazy motive they might have,
Hmm.
but we have to add it. And I'm using the motive that we don't have to add. That is the whole setup that I've set already gives this motive that they wouldn't want to be here to convince us to follow their rule. They might also have other motives, but at least there would be this one. And now there's this last piece of the puzzle we have to explain, which many people have noted is 100 million years more advanced. They came to see us. They could have either been completely obvious or completely invisible. These are both clearly choices they had.
Quiet or loud, I see you wrote.
Right. So they chose to be right at the edge in between, which is a strange to us choice. They didn't land on the White House lawn and make a big noise. And they aren't in sort of completely black satellites that we couldn't possibly see looking at us all.
Right.
They're being at the edge of our vision, showing a bit about themselves, but not too much. So that's the last part we have to explain. And the question is, what's the most likely assumption that would predict that we could add on to the assumptions we have now? Okay. And I would say their strategy for convincing us is to domesticate us, because this is how we have convinced other animals in our world to go along with what we say. And humans have domesticated actually themselves. So domestication mainly works by being around and nearby, not being too hostile, and then being very impressive, and basically sitting at the top of their status hierarchy. So this is how we convince dogs and horses, etc., to do what we say, is we are nearby, we're impressive, we slot it at the top of their status hierarchy, we beat out the other horses and dogs for the top status slot, and then we tell them what to do. And they do it because this is what social animals do regarding the highest status members of their society. So the strategy then is that this is just a robust way that animals everywhere, have status hierarchies, and they, then defer to their high status members. Then their strategy is just to be at the top of our status hierarchy and get us to accept them there and defer to them. So for that purpose, they just have to be visible and impressive. Okay. And they don't have to do much else. But you might say, well, why don't they still do more? Like, let us get to know them. Well, how could that hurt? And you realize humans already hate each other for slight differences. Pretty slight differences make human groups hate other human groups. These are actual aliens. So if they told us their whole history, we're going to hate something in it. We don't know. Maybe they eat babies. Who knows? They don't think it's a bad problem, but we will. So there's a big risk if they reveal too much. We'll find something, latch onto it, and hate it, and sort of destroy all the rest of their strategy. So then their strategy is be here, be impressive, don't, not too hostile, and don't show too much else about yourself. Because once we figure out they're there and believe them, we can infer their reason they're here, their message, and they don't need to say anything more. They never need to say anything more, because we can figure it all out. They should know we're smart enough to be able to do that. And so this is the simple story that I give a roughly 1 in 1,000 prior to. Panspermia siblings rule against expansion, here to domesticate us. And under this theory, unfortunately, they're not really going to say more. There's not going to be the sudden big reveal where they, tell us all the things we want to know about them. It's not going to happen. They're just going to hang out at the edge until we finally get persuaded. And if we never get persuaded, they probably have a button or something the plan B button, because they're going to enforce this rule one way or the other, but they'd like us to do it voluntarily. That would be the best scenario I can come up with. So that's my best scenario. Now, I don't say this is true. I say this is a high enough prior that you got to look at the evidence to consider if it's true.
Well, let me throw in some ideas from the Aetherius Society, maybe that you can take what you want from them. But again, it comes back to the law of karma, in that, if they did land on the White House lawn, gave us the secrets to all their technology, and then we use it as we would in a violent way, they would be karmically liable. And so what they can do is gradually raise our consciousness, get us to look up and, do what they're doing. One thing that, they became more visible when we started probing the atom. And because, not that we're a threat to them, because obviously, as you said, they're 10 million whatever lives or light years ahead of us, but that we're a threat to destroy ourselves. And so one thing they do is they can, because of the law of karma, they can't just take this nuclear radiation out of existence. They can use it as because there is only one energy in the entire system. They can convert it to fuel for their ships, so they can reduce the radiation in the atmosphere to use it to fly their ships. And then this day they can, it's a slight karmic manipulation. And they've also given us teachings, but it comes down to the law of karma.
So first, they wouldn't have to give us any technology to reveal themselves. They could just very clearly be there, but not just explain anything about how their stuff works and, shoo us away if we ever try to go probing. They would be quite capable of that. So, so this theory doesn't explain why they haven't, just shown up visibly. I still need this other explanation or some substitute for it to explain why they are hanging out at the edge of visibility. But it's not inconsistent with the scenario you've said. I'm just saying there's still this other thing we have to explain. And then you added a bunch of postulates in your scenario. And I don't know of any particular evidence that disproves them, but then I also don't know what things they explain in particular. It seems like it's just a set of new assumptions, but the point I would think is to try to explain what we see. So we're especially interested in assumptions that would then help explain some of the puzzling things we see. I don't know that we see anything about karma per se. That's again a plausible hypothesis, but
yeah, it will be
what evidence does it predict that we?
Well, it would be the red line through all of the consistency behind all their actions, and then with their behavior we've seen is that they can blink in and out of existence. They go to other realms, other frequency. They can change their frequency and reappear.
Well, so there are a lot of different UFO sightings that see a lot of different things, and so one of your challenges in trying to explain UFO sightings is to try to identify the most robust features of the sightings, because you're not sure all of them are reliable.
Yeah.
A lot of people just made mistakes or had
probably
hallucinations,
just 5%,
etc.
Yeah.
Right. So then the challenge is, what are the features you're going to try to explain, i.e. that you're going to say are robust enough that you think they need an explanation. So blinking in and out of existence, I wouldn't call that one of the most robust phenomena that we've seen there, but being impressive physically at the edge of visibility, that I'd say is pretty robust. That's
robust, yes.
They robustly are impressive.
Fast. Yeah.
And not too close.
Yeah.
Those are two pretty robust features. Another thing to say is there's just a lot of sightings. So it wasn't one visit, right?
Yeah.
Right. We've had hundreds of thousands of
Have you ever had a sighting yourself?
Nope. Not yet, but I keep looking out the window of the airplane. But there are the odds, so I don't see why I would have any better odds than anybody else. So I think that's unlikely. But a key question, of course, is say, if governments like the U.S. government have more evidence than they're showing, will we eventually get that, and will it eventually tell us much more? It seems like probably they haven't learned that much from it. So even if they reveal it to us, we wouldn't learn that much from it. What we might become is more confident that they're really there. So that would be the big thing that could happen in the next decades or century. But I don't think there's any particular rush about it. That is, people say, look, lately all these people are testifying and, having reports. Surely we're about to have the big reveal. And I go, if you look back over the last decades, we had pretty big reveals before that didn't lead to anything. Yeah. So I got to say, I don't see any particular prospects for something big changing soon, but it might. And then the biggest thing that might change is just governments show us more what they know. But apparently they're confused about what they know. So we'll still be confused. And the main thing we'll know is there's something weird there. And it's really impressive. And it's at the edge of our visibility. And we can't figure out much else than that. Yeah. And that's the thing to try to explain. Well, why are they hanging out here and not showing themselves, just hanging? What's the point of that?
Yeah, well, it's interesting you say that. Because we're told in the society, the governments they'll be the silence group. First, they'll deny it. And then when finally the evidence gets too great, they'll say, oh, they're a threat to us.
So the United Kingdom and the French governments, for example, claim to have released all of their UFO files, and they are pretty puzzling UFO files. So it's not obvious to me that they didn't, in fact, just tell us everything they know.
Hmm.
If you look at those files, there are a lot of reports of a lot of very hard to explain things. So it's not that all governments are hiding this stuff. It seems like a number of other governments in the
Well,
world
they
have
had a lot of pressure to. There was many
okay,
requests to.
right. But still, the point is maybe more governments will reveal more of what they know. And maybe the ones who finally reveal more will actually know more than the others did,
Mm.
but maybe not that much more.
But you agree
I,
with that they're not a threat because, as you said, that they could have destroyed us if they
well,
wanted to.
I mean, that doesn't mean, I mean, under my scenario, they have plan B button. If we don't voluntarily go along with their non-expansion, then they will force that on us. And the question is, what in their mind is the easiest, most effective way to force that? And it could be just to destroy us. That's still a possibility in our future. So under this scenario, we have to be worried about that. And this is also somewhat discouraging to those of us who thought we humans might have a lot of choices about going into the universe and doing a lot of things. We realize there's a big brother and they're going to have a lot of say into what we can do. And it may be a much more limited set of options than we had hoped for. That this,
Hmm.
so this theory, again, under this theory, the aliens aren't putting much priority on educating us or, leading us in the right religious way or, or preventing evil from happening to us. They've like hung out on the edge for a long time, letting lots of stuff happen here and not doing much to educate us. All the main education is just they're willing to say they exist. And that, if we are smart, tells us a bunch of things.
Okay.
And that like tells us a lot about our place in the universe and our place in the world of all the creatures in the universe. And if true, it's a big update.
Hmm.
Um, but there's a whole bunch of other stuff under this theory they're just not going to explain.
Okay. All right, Robin. Well, this has been great. I really enjoyed speaking to you because I've been reading your newsletters for so long now. And where can people sign up to your newsletter and hear more about you and follow your ideas as they evolve?
Well, I'm, at Robin Hanson on Twitter. I have a blog called overcomingbias.com. If you Google my name, you'll find other things. So I turn out to be pretty easy to find.
All right, great. And if people want to learn more about the Aetherius Society, they can go to aetherius.org. Thank you.